Communication is a process of creating shared understanding. This shared understanding allows us to connect with one another. Human beings are social by nature. Friendly contact and social interaction are important to our well-being.
If I really want you to connect with me as a friend, as a colleague, as someone who I'm there to help, I want you to understand that and get that feeling, understand from the way I interact with you, whether it's verbally or non-verbally, and so that there's no misunderstanding one way or the other. I think it's extremely important because we need to feel that what we're trying to convey really gets across.
Communication includes speaking, listening, and nonverbal cues. We communicate our emotions and attitudes nonverbally through body language, facial expressions, and gestures. 90% of all communication is nonverbal.
So what we really have to understand is simply, well, what are those verbal and nonverbal messages we're sending and how do they come across? Now, one example would be, especially nonverbally, sometimes you hear that it's not a good idea to fold your arms or to cross your legs, but it depends on when that situation and when those actions are put forth in that interaction you have with certain individuals. For instance, if I'm sitting here and I'm talking, or more importantly, am I listening to you, if I started out that conversation with my legs crossed or my arms fold, and I'm just really understanding what it is that you're saying and trying to convey to me, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. However, you can see where you can send a wrong message if, when you're talking to me, in the middle of that conversation, I do something like that, that clearly sends a message to the person that you're interacting with that I'm no longer really interested in what you have to say, or I disagree with what you have to say. We have to be very careful in when we use nonverbal cues, as well as what nonverbal cues we use. You want people to understand that they're important, that the things they say, the ways they interact are important to you.
Active listening means listening with an open attitude and paying full attention to what the other person is saying. Affirm what the person is saying by nodding in agreement. By really listening, you show respect and interest, which helps you connect in a positive way. Open-ended questions help to stimulate conversation more than questions that can be answered by yes or no.
So Bert, have you ever been to New York?
Yes.
Doesn't your daughter live in New York?
Yes.
So tell me more about your trip to New York.
Well, it was a long time ago. I think in the 50s.
You draw the person out and help him or her to share more fully. Other examples of open-ended questions are, you say you love country music. What are your favorite songs? Can you tell me how your mother made that dish? Other communication techniques include clarification. If you aren't sure you understand what was said, ask for clarification.
I want to make sure I understand what you're saying. Can you repeat that?
Another technique to make sure that you understand is repeating what the person just said.
I think I have a doctor's appointment tomorrow.
So, did you say that you're not sure if you had a doctor's appointment tomorrow? Is that right?
Be patient with your client's communication process. Side effects from medication, pain, hearing or speech impairments, and some medical conditions can make it difficult for people to communicate effectively. If your client has a hearing aid, check to see whether it is in place. Face him directly and get his attention before you start speaking. Do not chew gum, eat or drink while speaking. Keep your hands away from your face while talking. Speak in a normal fashion without shouting. Reduce or eliminate background noise as much as possible when carrying on conversations.
More often than not, the elderly do have a slower pace. They have a slower speech pattern. They have a slower way of getting words out because they're taking so much time, making sure sometimes that you're understanding what they have to say. And in that case, you don't want to try to push them too fast. You don't want to get to the point of saying, okay, what else do you have to say so that I can move on? or we really need to get this done, so what else do you have to say? No, you want to try to follow their way and their speed, because what ends up happening, the positive thing that ends up happening, is that you get so much more out of them when you allow them to work at their own speed rather than try to push them to whatever speed you're at. So there are those times when you're going to find yourself in uncomfortable conversations, when the person you're interacting with will bring up things that you don't feel very comfortable talking about. And you really have to understand how to take the conversation away from that point. And it's okay. It's okay to say to a person, you know, I just don't feel very comfortable talking about that. I don't mean to offend you, but if we would, let's change the conversation. And I think that's a very positive thing, because what it does is give that person an opportunity to understand that I hear what you're saying, I understand what you're saying, but I don't feel comfortable interacting in this way. So let's move away from that. Well, at some point, you'll probably find yourself in a situation where someone is going to share with you something very emotional to them, whether it's death or thoughts of death or a long illness that they're having or such things like that. And they really are looking for someone to just listen to them. Because so many times we don't have just that person we can have as a sounding board, someone that will listen to us and help us work out things or work through things on our own. Remember, you're not there to solve their problems. You're going in to make a difference in someone's life. You're going in to do something that's going to bring about peace and joy to them. And you communicate that simply by the way you present yourself, the way you present, the way you listen, the way you use nonverbal skills in the sense of not closing yourself off to them. You are going to be someone that will change that person's life for that day or maybe even for the rest of their lives.
One of the most important things in working with older people is not bringing ageist attitudes to our work and relationships with them. Ageist attitudes are really stereotypes in our society about older people that really are not true for everybody. And it's so important that when we're working with one individual that we are focused on that person and not have stereotypes color our work with that individual. Many stereotypes exist. Perhaps number one is that all older people are senile. Thinking that people, when they're older, all experience some decline in mental capacity. Other stereotypes are that older adults are useless and really do not contribute to their family and community. Yet we know many older adults are very involved in their communities. In fact, talking about families, we have many older adults that are actual parents to their grandchildren. A common stereotype is that older people are sexless, that they aren't interested in intimacy or sexual involvement, and yet we know that as people age, the need, the feelings in terms of intimacy and sexuality do not die. As one older gentleman told me, he says the fires are still burning, and he was 93. Another common stereotype is that people as they age tend to get irritable, grouchy, and are not fun to be around. There are some older adults who are maybe more difficult to be around and are irritable, but there's usually some underlying factors. Perhaps they're in a lot of pain, they're dealing with multiple health issues, or sometimes they may be just depressed. But aging itself does not result in greater irritability and grouchiness. A common stereotype about older people is that everybody who's older has hearing loss. How that affects communication, if we believe that, with every older person we have contact with, we may tend to talk louder at them, raise the pitch of our voice, which makes it even more difficult for that person to hear, or we think they will hear better if we slow down and exaggerate. What can happen when we begin communicating with an older adult, especially one who is frail, on the basis of stereotypes, is that we start communicating with them in what we consider childlike ways. Sometimes when individuals will use terms that they think are terms of endearment, such as sweetie, honey, dearie, and yet they really don't recognize the individuality of the person. It's much more respectful to use the individual's title and name. Mr. Smith, Mrs. Alvarez, Mrs. Robinson, unless the person then gives permission to call them by their first name or a nickname that they might prefer. Sometimes too we may be using child terms and asking an individual to do something, and to say, for example, do you need to go to the potty, is really not respectful of this individual as an adult. So basically, we want to speak to that older person no matter how frail that individual is, no matter how old that person is, just as we would talk with another adult.
The way you present yourself through your clothing and posture gives others information and impressions about you. It is another form of communication. Be sure to maintain good hygiene in order to eliminate body odor or bad breath. Fingernails should be kept short. Dressing professionally in neat, clean, modest clothing shows that you respect yourself, your clients, and the work you do. Clothing should be comfortable and easy to move in. Low-cut tank tops, tight pants, shorts, or other revealing clothing is not appropriate to wear to work. Keep your makeup and jewelry simple. Positive communication becomes natural when you use techniques such as active listening, asking open-ended questions, pacing, and clarification. Clear, respectful communication is a powerful tool that allows shared understanding, rapport, and trust. Learning to communicate effectively has many long-lasting benefits for you and your care recipient.